Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning and welcome to Live Natural, Live Well. This is your host, Heather Lounsbury. Thanks so much for joining me today. In just a minute, I'm going to be bringing on the children's book author, Ruby Roth. I'm a big fan of her work and definitely love her message along with the beauty of her artistry. So I'm excited to have her on today. If you have any questions, it's 347-884-9533. That's 347-884-9533. And just as a heads up, if you like the show, definitely mark it as a favorite. And you can also join my newsletter. I don't sell any of my email list to get more info about future shows and great health tips. And that's at livenaturallivewell.com. That's livenaturallivewell.com. And let me go ahead and bring Ruby on. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I guess we should start off with you telling my listeners a little bit about yourself.
I am a vegan artist and author of two of the first books of their kind in children's literature. My first was called That's Why We Don't Eat Animals, and it was about the emotional lives of animals, factory farming, and the environment, how we impact all of those things. And my second, most recent book is Vegan is Love, Having Heart and Taking Action. And that one's about how far across the world we can send our love through the choices that we make every day.
Nice. And what initially inspired you to go vegan, and also what got you interested in writing children's books?
Well, looking back on my youth, I think everything pointed to me discovering veganism. I was my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, so I grew up with an acute sense and sensitivity to oppression and what that means. I was raised by progressive, eco-minded, thrift store, recycling maniac parents on an organic farm. So I learned a lot about, I learned to have contempt for chemicals and have love for the pureness of the land and pure food. And I had a liberal education. I studied American studies, social, political history, race, class, gender, and it really veganism didn't occur to me until a friend pointed out that my eating habits did not match my morals and values. And that was a turning point for me. And I started to look into the belly of the beast, if you will, of our food and agriculture systems and factory farming practices and animal agriculture in general, and tried veganism cold turkey for a month and never went back. And I got into creating these books because I was teaching art at an elementary school, and the kids were always really curious about why I wasn't eating the string cheese that they were being served at lunch. And I went to look for a book that would help me explain myself to them, and I couldn't find anything that wasn't about a talking animal or a talking vegetable. And these kids were just too cool for that, and I didn't think that they could relate. So with my background in art and political studies, American studies, I decided to create this book myself, the one that I would want to use to explain veganism to kids.
Oh, that's such a great story. And I guess from there, let's talk about some of the things for my listeners who haven't seen the book, what they can expect from the book, and what age range would you say it's for?
Both of the books, the official age range is 7 and up, but I think that you can introduce the pictures to as kids, as soon as they begin to talk and start being cognizant of the world around them, there's a jumping off point for discussion and learning just by looking at pictures and talking about animals. That's why we don't eat animals. I go through the emotional lives of animals. It's all factual information about their behaviors when they're allowed to express their natural instincts versus their lives on factory farms. And I talk about the environment and the rainforests and other things that we can do. In the end of the book, there's a list to help animals and to help the environment and to be healthy ourselves. And the second book, Vegan is Love, whereas the first one is kind of about the why, the second book is about the how. So I go into everything from food and clothing to animal testing to entertainment, zoos, circuses, marine life parks. And each page essentially has an affirmation on it about what we can do. So as much as this is a kid's book, at its core, it's really about democracy and supply and demand and engaging ourselves in the public realm. And I think if we start doing that with children a lot younger than college-age kids, then we can only we'll only be leaning towards a better, more logical, functioning, healthy world.
Oh, I totally agree. I remember when I was in college, I was a nanny for a summer to a 3-year-old boy, and the family lived next to this small farm that they had their own cows, and we would go over there and talk to the cows, and I would say I'm sorry to them. I was and he started to say I'm sorry too. So he totally, I mean, I don't know, he's an adult now in his 20s, I guess, but I don't know what kind of long-term impact that had on him.
Well, I think it's important, all the seeds that we plant with the factual information. You never know how that might affect somebody later on.
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully, because I knew the parents, he didn't eat meat just because he was a picky eater. It wasn't like he was thinking about it being an animal, but the parents had such a hard time with his eating habits that I know if I pushed my agenda too much that they would have fired me. So I did it in those subtle ways. And I can say one of my closest friends has a now 3-year-old, and he's been reading your books since he was a small baby, and he's totally hooked on them. The parents are vegan. They don't have him totally vegan yet, but they just recently went vegan themselves, so I'm hoping that will happen soon. But he totally gets it, and, he's only 3.
Yeah,
so.
I think there's a lot of people who will say and who have said that this information is completely inappropriate for children and they can't understand it and it's going to freak them out. But the reality is I've read this book to thousands of kids in a lot of classrooms around the nation, and I've never once encountered a kid who was overwhelmed. And in fact, the opposite. They're interested, they're eager to participate in something that helps animals and the environment. And I think when you give kids the information they need to make educated choices, then they choose wisely.
Oh, absolutely. And, I personally hear stories all the time of small children, once they find out what meat actually is, asking their parents if they can get, to give up meat. And sometimes they have parents that support them, but a lot of times they don't, unfortunately. When you're that little, you can't go do your own grocery shopping or cook your own meals. So, but it's nice to see. And how did you get into schools? I would think that would be challenging because of, you're really questioning authority and what the mainstream wants children to know. So how did you get into schools?
I was in school before I started talking about this, so it was not one of the points that they hired me on. And at first I really was scared to say anything. I thought I would get fired. And after a while I just thought, you know what, I'm in the teaching position. These kids are asking me questions, and I should be answering them. It's not unlike speaking of any other culture and way of life around the world, which just reading a history book is doing just that. We are discussing how people around the world eat. So I just started explaining it in my own opinion, very factually, very non-emotionally, very frankly but gently. And we had really great conversations. I never got any complaints from anybody, from any parents or from any of the school authorities. I'm sure it has to do with being in Los Angeles and not elsewhere. But I think there's a way to navigate for other people who work with children to just keep in mind, if it becomes an issue, that you are discussing facts and you are discussing different ways that people around the world choose to eat and live.
Right. So you haven't read the book at schools outside of the LA area?
Oh yeah, I've read them all over.
Okay.
But when I was in the classroom developing the book. Yeah. Okay.
And how did you, with the schools that you've gone to since writing the books, what was the response outside of LA? Were parents just as okay with it, or?
You know what? In all of these cases, I'm invited in. It's very hard to go into. I'll speak just in Los Angeles. You can't go into a public school because they can't legally, quote unquote, endorse any one diet, even though they clearly do. If you go into the lunchrooms, there's endorsement and industry. Yeah,
there's ads and
so I've worked just by being invited in by a single teacher, usually, and at other events. So I'm not encountering too much controversy with, in where I'm being invited into.
That's great. And let's segue into, I know we've talked about this before the show, how you did handle the controversy and the upset around your books, and if you want to share that experience a little bit, and also I think it's good for people to hear how you handled it, just because a lot of times, vegans and people who are passionate about whatever their cause is, sometimes we can get too aggressive or angry, so it turns people away, and I think how you handled it was so great. So maybe some tips on how people can handle when someone's in their face the way you experienced.
Yeah, well, what happened with the release of Vegan is Love in last April, it did create a little media blitz. There was a lot of words used like brainwashing and controversial and graphic and frightening and inappropriate for children. And I really think that the most fascinating part of the entire outrage was that by calling my books controversial, people were admitting that what we do to animals is scary, too scary to even talk about. So to me, that's an amazing slice of where we are in the social and political landscape of America. People saying that we want to be willfully ignorant and impose that ignorance on our children. And my experience in the media was, it was pretty insane, the questions that I was asked all along those lines of being, forcing my opinions down children's throats, and I had to talk about it. And the way I did it, was not necessarily calculated, but just part of my personality. I think my approach to discussing something that I'm really passionate about ends up being to appear neutral, even if I'm not feeling neutral, but rather to say, here's my opinion, here's some facts that I know, take it or leave it. And I think people react better to that. They don't have a knee-jerk reaction, and they might take something you say to heart, especially if you've got some good facts in your back pocket. But I think that it's really important not to come off angry. not because it's not justified, which I think all of the anger and the passion and the outrage that we feel as vegans, that we just feel so urgent, we feel such an urgency to share with people, is justified. But I think most importantly as activists, we don't want to become the things that we hate, so that in our fight against animal abuse and factory farming, we don't become a living, walking manifestation of factory farming, meaning if we allow that to occupy our brains and our language and our interactions, then we are literally becoming that manifestation of a factory farm. And I think you will defeat your purpose as an activist by coming off that way.
Yeah. Oh, I couldn't agree more, because I know from my own personal experience being attacked, like, because I was a vegetarian for like over 20 years before I finally became vegan, and I had some vegans in my life that would just be really in my face about it, and I get why they were that way, but it definitely turned me off from committing. I mean, it's not that I'm blaming them, but it definitely was like, oh, I don't want to become I don't want to become that. So
well, it's very uncomfortable to discuss or to criticize people. We don't generally do that in the public sphere, face to face. So people get very uncomfortable, and this is actually what makes working with kids for me so amazing. Kids don't have these defensive knee-jerk reactions. They react and they respond to my books with such a great sense of diplomacy and fairness to the cause. They will really hear you out and take the information in and think about it. Yeah. And that is something that we lose as adults.
Yes, it's sad, but we definitely do. I like how you touched on that with kids' responses. Do you have like one? I know you have probably hundreds, if not thousands, of great stories, but do you have one kid that kind of sticks out to you that you've met and connected to since these books have come out?
Oh, there's been such great moments of insight from kids that I love, but I will never forget when I was in the classroom. I went back to the classroom that I was first teaching at when I had started developing the books and read the finished product to the kids. And this one fourth grade girl, she raised her hand and she just wanted me to know that she felt that the factory farms were very similar to slavery, which was what she was studying in her history class. And I just thought that was so powerful and insightful. I just love that impact, those connecting the dots and thinking about other parts of her education that she's bringing in to apply across the board. And that's why I think giving kids information that allows them to compete with authorities, be it a doctor on TV or their teachers, I think this kind of education lasts a lifetime, this kind of critical thinking and connecting dots and thinking for yourself. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. I love that. Have you ever thought about writing an adult book?
You know, I love the artwork. I'm an artist before I'm a writer. So to me, these projects stem from the art. But I always say that they are so easy, even adults can understand. So I think even for adults, they make great little gifts because they get the whole picture of the motives behind veganism in 32 pages. But I think I'm going to focus on kids because I really feel like there's a lack of resources in general for kids. And I'm really interested in the way we treat children in general in society and how they're always seen as frail and completely dependent on us and pure and innocent. And I think they're much more complex, capable beings than they're given credit for. So for now I'm sticking with the children's realm.
I think that's a the word I'm looking for. That's definitely a good reason for it, because I think I have to agree that the kids I have several children who are patients, and I see how their parents interact with them and how they're sort of, I don't know, look down on is the right word, but they get what's going on with them. If they have a health issue, and having an adult acknowledge in a different way what they're going through definitely helps the healing process. And I think it goes the same for giving them this powerful message. And I think most kids can handle hearing the truth, and they'd rather hear that than learn later. Because I remember when I had the aha moments with a lot of things growing up, it's like, wait, why was this hidden from me? And it kind of made me angry.
Well, that's the great thing about kids is they not only can handle the truth, but when you speak to them like they can handle the truth, they really pay attention because they feel like you're letting them in on a secret. Not a lot of people, not a lot of teachers, not a lot of people on the playground speak to them in a way that makes them feel like they have a valid opinion or they have a choice in their life. And I think with older kids, with teenagers, you can be even more radical because they're just itching for anti-authoritarian content in life. So when you hit them with how tricked we are all being, they really perk up.
Oh, yeah. And do you know if there's any books for teens that have a vegan message to them? I've never really looked into that at all.
I think by the time kids are teens, they can really handle books like by Rory Friedman and Omnivore's Dilemma. I know that there's an Omnivore's Dilemma edition for youth, but I personally don't think that. I think it's a great book, but Michael Pollan doesn't feel pro-vegan to me, and I certainly found some flaws in the vegan section of that book, but I think it's a great starting point.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, with Michael Pollan, he's definitely, I know I've seen interviews where he said there's nothing inherently wrong with eating animals, which I find kind of strange, but at the same time, that's not his focus.
Yeah. Well, I think he's a great intro to the mainstream, for the mainstream, kind of like Food Inc. was. And Food Inc. to me was the tip of the iceberg, but it maybe had to be that way to get out to the mainstream. So I think Michael Pollan and Omnivore's Dilemma may be step one, and step two is taking a little more personal responsibility for our choices.
Yeah, exactly. And I recently read that Dr. Oz is now, he's been pretty good about having the vegan message out there, and I think he's vegetarian. I know his wife is.
Yes, his wife is. I've heard
but
that.
Now he's saying he's backtracking on meat and saying there's nothing wrong with meat and there's nothing wrong with eating factory farm-raised meat, because he used to be all about like the quote-unquote grass-fed, free-range part of it, which that's a whole other radio show. But unfortunately, he's backtracked on that. I don't know if he's gotten pressure from advertisers or what.
I'm sure he has, and maybe that's the reason why I've seen shows where he focused on superfoods, and then one of them I think was salmon, fish oil, something, and I just felt like, oh my God, why not just take it the full step? He's
gone under pressure, and I know he also promotes like medications quite a bit too, saying there's no dangers to most medications. But anyway, I'm slowly
don't get us started.
So I know you mentioned when we spoke before that you're working on a new book, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about what people can expect and give us a teaser, if you can.
Well, it will be out next year. It's for even younger kids. It's going to be a lighter, quirkier, funny book, and it'll be for vegan kids. But I've got several projects in the making, and people can stay tuned by joining my mailing lists, Facebook, Twitter, the whole shebang. They can get to all of that through WeDon'tEatAnimals.com.
Great. So it'll be out in 2014?
Yes.
Okay. How long does it take you to write a book and do the artwork?
The first one was the longest. The writing process was the longest part for me, just because I had so much information and so much research that I wanted to relay to kids. I think I started, my first draft was like 4,000 words, and that really had to be cut way, way, way down. So it was at least a year for the artwork and creating the text. The second one went a little faster just because I was more familiar with the process. And the third one I'm really getting the hang of. So actually, I think, did I just say it was out in 2014?
Yes.
It'll be out this year, fall of this year.
Oh, okay.
I forget that we've just come into a new year.
Yes, 2013. I love that your books have to be under 4,000 words, because I'm just finishing up my book. Hopefully it will be out by the end of the year, and mine has to be 60,000 words. So maybe that's the writing.
You can borrow some of mine. When I first turned in a 4,000-word manuscript, I was like, this is going to be a very different book, and it's going to be new and different. And the editors were like, it's not going to be a new and different book in that respect.
Yes.
You are out of your mind.
Yes. Got to be quick information. Yeah, maybe I'll switch to kids' books in the future. Because writing 60,000 words is, yes, it's worth it, but it's a lot. It's a lot to write.
Yeah.
So we only have a minute or two left. If there's anything you want to share with my listeners before we say goodbye.
I would just encourage anyone who's now heard of veganism probably multiple times. It seems like it's making its way further and further into the mainstream. For people to really explore any feelings of ambivalence that they have towards it, and really try to get down to what exactly that is. Because I think a lot of people, if they knew what was going on in the animal agriculture industry, the collusion between the USDA and the FDA and the pharmaceutical companies and animal agriculture, and how it all feeds one another, I think most people would choose to abstain from the entire system, as we vegans have once we make the change. So I just think it's really important for people to explore their ambivalencies and really ask themselves what's holding them back, because I think that veganism is a solution not only for personal health and well-being, but economically, as far as healthcare and shifting jobs, green jobs, back into the U.S. It just has choosing veganism has such a far-reaching impact. We can really reach every major industry in every corner of the earth with a positive impact. So I encourage people to do a little research. It's accessible to everybody. It's right at your fingertips.
Great. Thank you. It was great for you to share. I really appreciate you taking the time out.
Thank you.
To talk to me and my listeners today, and I wish you the best of luck on future books.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ruby. You take care.
Bye.
Bye. So thanks for joining me today, listeners. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me, info@livenaturallivewell.com. And if you are interested in transitioning into a more plant-based diet, I'm happy to work with you. I do phone consults, so be in touch. 310-259-5165. Take care.